Hello, my dears. Today we're going to talk about empathy. And I'm sure by now that you've all heard that autistic people don't have empathy and that we're some kind of cold-hearted, unfeeling robot people. Or at least that's how the media portrays us. Alright, let's bust some stereotypes. First of all, this idea of an unfeeling human computer is obviously super harmful because people, including myself, will think there's no way they're autistic because they aren't that. Also because that idea makes it really easy to see us as not human, which sets us up for not great things. But where does the stereotype come from? Well, neurotypicals. And not just the scientists who discussed and wrote about autism, but also the majority of everyday neurotypicals. Because turns out, it's not that autistic people have impaired social skills and empathy. We have autistic social skills and empathy. We're not defective, just different, and society doesn't like that, so it calls us defective? I'm shocked. Okay, but seriously, this is a scientifically proven thing. It's called the double empathy problem, and it essentially means that autistic to autistic communication is great, and allistic to allistic communication is great, and autistic to allistic communication is not great. It can be great, but it takes a lot more understanding. And a study that the Autistic Cats recently posted showed that when rating conversations, autistic people will rate conversations with autistic people and allistic people to be about the same because we're used to both kinds of conversation. Allistic people? Yeah, they rated the other allistic people as great and the autistic people as bad. And we're the ones with social skills problems? Anyway, this is a claim that the autistic community has been making for years. But if you look into the scientific history of autism, you will discover that many studies wouldn't have needed to happen if they just talked to an autistic person. Anyway, this new idea was discovered in 2016. So how is our communication different, you ask? Well, every autistic person is different, but here are some general cultural things that we tend to do that neurotypicals see as uncaring and self-centered and rude. For example, we are very direct. Some people see that as blunt and rude, others as honest and refreshing. And in my experience, those people will change their opinion, whether it's positive or not, based on how the statement affects them. But why do we do this? Well, let me give you a scenario. I'm sitting on the couch and you say, "Hey, Sydney, there are some dishes in the sink," and then leave. Did you know that that's apparently supposed to be a request to do the dishes? I've been told that it's a polite way to ask someone to do something, but if you say that to me, my brain just goes, there are dishes in the sink. I have no idea why you were telling me this, but thank you for the fun fact, I guess. And neurotypical people use a lot of these methods of talking about a thing without actually saying the thing. And to those of us who process the world differently, that makes no sense. When listening and understanding takes a lot of energy already, why spend the energy to hide your meaning and make the other person have to decode it? So we like our communication as clear, direct, and straightforward as it can be. So yes, it may be perceived as less polite, but at least we know what's going on. We also have a tendency to interrupt a lot, which is another thing that is seen as rude in most cultures. But there's generally a logic to it. When we get the general gist of where the other person is going, we'll hop in to add on to show that we are interested and paying attention, and it lets the conversation build. And in general, we discuss several things at once. It's like a conversation has multiple tabs open and we keep flipping between them, but we're easily able to follow each one. Also, we talk about ourselves a lot. I know, how dare we be so self-centered, right? Well, actually, no, because this is how we connect. For example, if my friend is talking about how one of their professors said something really offensive and now they feel terrible, I'll respond with my own story about something similar happening to me. Seems self-centered, right? But no, I'm showing that friend that I understand where they're coming from, and I appreciate that they're comfortable being vulnerable with me and that I feel comfortable being vulnerable with them. And by telling my story, I can share how I dealt with the situation, which then lends itself to problem solving. It's not, if I were in your position, I would do this. It's, I've been in your position and here's what I did and how it went. I've recently learned that to neurotypicals, that is in fact offensive because sometimes people just want to rant and they don't want your input. So now when I'm talking to people I don't know as well, I ask if they want input or just want someone to listen. Notice that I'm not changing this piece of myself and how I communicate, I'm just adding an extra piece to gauge the situation. And I will repeat this a few times. Autistic people don't need to change. The world and the people around us need to change. A social blunder isn't entirely our fault, it's just as much ours as it is the neurotypical involved. But since we're seen as being socially defective, all the blame gets put on us for a less than perfect interaction. Last spring, I learned a lot about social skills, and some things I learned I did keep because they were good tools and pointers on being a generally kinder person. But we should not be required to study and learn and change ourselves in order to be accepted by the world. Back to the thing about sharing about ourselves in conversations. Even in a script, I can't help but talk about several things at once. But I always come back to the original point eventually. So by sharing about ourselves, we are showing empathy. To an outsider, it looks like we're just sitting together and each talking about ourselves, but we're showing that we truly care and identify with what the other person is saying. In a recent conversation I had, I talked about a new editing technique that I had learned for about a solid 10 minutes, and then they responded with a 10-minute discussion about their new plant and how they're taking care of it. The DSM sees this as reduced sharing of interests, emotion, or affect, but it's actually me saying, hi, here's a thing that I'm really excited about, and them saying, hey, I love that you're excited about that. Here's a thing I'm excited about. And it's the most wholesome of all things. Not only that, but since we are so used to neurotypicals shutting us down and not caring about our special interests, it's almost hard to believe when someone genuinely wants us to info dump. One of my favorite things when I'm talking to a fellow Audie is to ask a question that prompts an info dump, and once they realize I'm fully serious, watch their eyes just light up as they talk. First of all, it's incredibly pure. And second of all, now I know a lot about birds and rocks and Judaism and a specific video game and neuroscience and lots of other super random topics. So if you've never done this to your Audie friends, I highly recommend it. Anyway, empathy. We were talking about empathy. We show empathy by sharing our own stories, and that leads to problem solving. Yes, we Audies tend to be fixers. But why is that? Well, because the majority of us have this thing called alexithymia, which I formerly pronounced alexithymia because frankly that's the better pronunciation even though it's wrong, but that's beside the point. Let's break down this big and weirdly spelled and hard to pronounce word. It's formed from a bunch of Greek roots and literally translates to lack of words for emotion. Also known as I'm feeling feelings but I don't know what feelings I'm feeling, please send help. And it actually affects about 1 in 10 people. It's common in depression, autism, ADHD, eating disorders, and many other mental health conditions. It doesn't mean that we're unfeeling, just that we don't have a way to describe those feelings. And as part of that, we tend to pick up emotions from the environment. Because if we can't name our own, we can't distinguish them from other ones. So back to the example of the friend telling me about a professor doing something upsetting. That friend is super upset, and I pick up that emotion, so now I'm upset too. And I don't like this feeling, so I want to make it go away for both of us, which motivates me to make them feel better so that we can both feel better. And this is why we tend to be fixers and give lots of advice. And it's not just for people that we're close to. If I see somebody crying in the dining hall, even if I have no idea who they are, it'll make me really upset. And I don't like watching dramatic TV shows because I get so invested in the characters and the show that it takes over my life. And I prefer to watch movies because the story is done within a 2-hour time frame so I don't feel stuck, or to watch movies and TV shows I've already seen because I know what'll happen. I also really like watching shows on Animal Planet and Discovery and Food Network because they don't really have a plot. They're just learning about animals or food, and that's really relaxing for me. But we can also flip the other way. If someone is describing a situation I can't imagine and have never been in, I don't know what it feels like, so I can't relate. And sometimes I feel so much that my brain decides it doesn't have the capacity to feel feelings anymore, so it just shuts down. And those responses make us look distant and uncaring. In the majority of cases, we actually care a whole lot. And this can make it very difficult to connect with other people because since we can't name the emotions that we're feeling, we can't really name those of other people either. So it's hard to understand what their tone or facial expressions could mean. Or ours, for that matter. For me, I can tell when somebody's happy, and I can tell when they're not happy. But anything in the not happy category is kind of confusing, so I could be convinced that somebody's mad at me when really they're just anxious about a paper that they have to write. And yes, I am in fact an actress, so how the heck does that work? Well, I have a hard time explaining what a character could be feeling in a moment. But since I've spent my entire life masking and pretending to be neurotypical, the actual acting piece is completely natural for me. Traditional acting education focuses on emotions on the page first and then how they can be put into actions. And I work the other way around. I put myself in the character's shoes, relate it to my own experience, and then I act it. And then I have to figure out why I did that so that I can replicate it. And that makes theater education super difficult. But anyway, I digress once again. It's also important to remember that we may appear to have no affect on the outside, but to other autistic people, I can read that as emotion. I may not be entirely positive what it is, but I can say, hey, are you mad or sad right now? And I can help them to untangle what they're feeling. It's yet another way that we connect with each other. So though some of us may appear to be robotic and emotionless, that's simply the perception that you have of us. There's more beneath the surface. Now, how can alexithymics get these introspection skills to make it easier? Well, first of all, cognitive behavioral therapy works wonders. It teaches you to talk things out and unravel what your thoughts are and what the root cause of those feelings might be. Thanks to therapy, I'm now much better at regulating both my own emotions and the ones I pick up from other people. I also find that talking out my feelings or journaling them out helps me a lot. I now turn a lot of these things I'm experiencing into song lyrics, which has drastically improved my ability to put things into words. This also extends to other arts like dance, visual art, acting, music, and many others because it gives us something to help externalize and express our emotions. I also really appreciate people who label what my emotions could be, especially when I'm clearly overloading because it's much harder to regulate when I'm feeling that way. Simply saying, hey, you look stressed, do you need a break, is more helpful than you may think. Also in conversation, explaining your feelings clearly helps us to understand what you're going through. And there's definitely a line between helpful and condescending here, so just be aware. And lastly, my favorite tool of all is the feel wheel, which you may remember from my accommodations and comforts video. There are many types of emotional toolkits with word banks and other things to help name emotions, but this is by far my favorite. It's a little wheel that starts with 7 categories of emotion and then branches out into more specific words. And then when I find the words to describe what I'm feeling, I automatically feel significantly better. A lot of therapy trains us to handle emotions, but that is, of course, not helpful if you can't figure out what you're feeling. I have a big one on my wall and then a teeny one that I keep in my backpack. We also have one on our fridge at home, so it's always available. And I will link the feel wheel as well as a comprehensive pain scale below, and feel free to use them as resources for yourself or anyone you know who's struggling. So, to sum up this vaguely coherent video, autistic people are not defective socially, just different. And we often feel too much empathy or no empathy, or a combo of both. And our insides and our outsides often don't match up. Also, words for feelings are hard. Anyway, I hope you learned a thing and that this can help you to be more understanding and improve your interactions with other people. And a reminder to my autistic viewers that you're not defective. You're you. And you're different. And you don't have to change who you are just because some neurotypical wants you to. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.